The more pipes and penetrations and skylights your house has, the more you got to think about before your roof goes on to make sure that you're really going to have a long-lasting and dry roof after your clients move in. But you know what? We're also looking for that critical stage of construction called dry-in. That's the kind of temporary dry-in stage that keeps the house dry during construction, but the final roof is not on. On the Build Show today, second generation, fantastic builder out of Seattle, Washington, Bryan Uhler is going to give his pre-roofing checklist. The best of the Build Show, let's get going.
Hi, I'm Bryan with Pioneer Builders. In this video of the Build Show, we're going to talk about the work it takes to get prepared with your plumbing and mechanical systems in order to get your roof on. Let's get into the details. What we've found makes the most sense is to get our plumbing vents through the roof and any other penetrations that need to be through the roof before the roofer shows up, so everything can get waterproofed, weatherproofed properly, instead of having to cut things in later. In this particular case, we have plumbing vents that need to go through the roof and just one vent that's for the microwave hood. So we'll get into what those things are, but let's talk just a little bit about the logistics. Whenever possible, I try to save trip time and potentially trip charges for subcontractors. However, I find that the trades know their job better than I do, and they can understand the logistics of what makes life simpler for everybody. Nobody likes rework, and nobody likes to be uncomfortable. So, one of the things that we have to work with, you might not be able to see it, we were just shooting outside and my glasses are wet. Yep, it's July 6th or so, raining, Washington State. Plumbers don't like working in the rain either. Nobody likes it. So if we can have the roof completely framed, completely dried in, everybody gets a comfortable place to work. The fact is we're human. And when we're physically uncomfortable, what we actually craft and put together might not be as high a quality just because we're human. So we want to give plumbers and everybody a dry place to work. But in order to make things efficient, they have to come out and make one trip in order to get our vents through the roof. We have a new plumber. I communicated with them, and they totally like doing this trip. It's short, so instead of having plumbing vents go into the house when they're doing their rough-in, they make one trip for this. One other thing to note, they do leave the plumbing boots on site. Those are the little gasket pieces that go over the top and get integrated into the roofing. So if you're working with plumbers, you might want to just do that extra little bit of communication. So we'll show you a couple of details on this guy. Number one, they have their lettering facing outwards. If you're a plumber, even if it's underground, try to have your lettering facing outwards so that people can see what it actually is. This one here is 1.5 inches. So that's kind of nice to be able to see. They didn't run it into the crawl space. That will go through the bottom plate and connect up over with the kitchen sink. Up here you can see that they pretty well centered it through the double top plate. They went up through the roof, and then they actually wrote with a Sharpie, vent is 10 inches above roof. These folks nicely left plumbing vents. You want to make sure that you communicate with the roofer as need be, with the plumber as need be. It's like the old expression, the empire was lost for the want of a shoe. You have to have things on site in order for the roofer to do his job. It's nice for the plumber because they know if they're 1.5 inches, if they're 2 inches, whatever their vents are, so they leave the plumbing boots. You just want to make sure all of that's coordinated so that when the roofer shows up, people aren't just standing there twiddling their thumbs. Originally on the plan, it shows having the kitchen sink out here in an island. It's going to be a fairly small island, about 60 inches wide, 37 inches or so for the countertop, 12-inch overhang. That's just not enough room for a sink to be very functional or to have a functional island. Kids are going to be doing homework. If you're doing baking, you want to roll things out. I would rather have a clean slab countertop. So we move the kitchen sink over here, and that's where the drain is going to drop into the crawl space, and then it'll pick up with that vent. So that's just this one little area. You can kind of see how much we have to consider just when it comes to getting in this early when it comes to the venting. If you look up high, there's not a good way to vent going straight up. You know, that's the shortest run, typically speaking, is right behind the plumbing fixture. This is a shear wall. So I don't even want them coming up over through here and just taking more meat out. So you again see that there's a lot of trades. Now we're even getting into the design engineering side of things, understanding all of these different factors and then going, that's where the plumbing vent's gonna go. Why in the world am I up on a ladder? It's because now we're talking about getting a duct pipe that goes through the roof. Whenever possible, I try to eliminate having penetrations through the roof, but in this case, this is where the range hood is gonna go, and so we're going way up when it comes to that particular pipe. Actually, locating this properly takes a little bit of work. Like with the other stuff, you can always hire somebody, kitchen firms, design firms, architects who can do some of this locating for you. As a spec builder, the more things that we have the skills to be able to do, the better. So I'm gonna walk you through what I had to do for the kitchen layout and then what we had to do as far as getting that particular cutout done. All right, so we keep this very simple, just doing a little bit of layout. So what we end up having is a 21-inch cabinet, a range, which in this case is only 30 inches, 21, that way it's balanced, and then we do 36 inches for the refrigerator. We'll go ahead and go through how I actually do the measuring. I like, honestly, having different tapes for different things that I'm doing. So in this case, I just use a little 16-incher. I've got a little framer's square and a pencil. You just have to kind of know how things are actually constructed. So you have to take into account that there's a 1/2 inch worth of drywall. So if you have a 1/2 inch of drywall at 21.5, I like to use my square underneath it, and now I get a pretty straight line. Then you can either add 30 inches, you can move this down 30 inches. In this case, I'm just gonna end up doing that. If you do 30 inches plus 21 plus a 1/2 inch, it ends up being 51.5. So then you can draw your line there. What we want is the center of that. And you can see my scribbles because originally we had thought about doing 18 inches. I forgot that we had changed over to 21. So you have 30 inches, 15 inches is right where I have this line drawn here. This is going to be the center of the duct. In more technical sets or maybe commercial sets, you'll have an RCP or a reflected ceiling plan. That allows you to see what things are going on up at the ceiling level. So this information you might be able to find somewhere else. Our drawing sets are incredibly simple. So this is just something that we can take on ourselves. Now, we've located center of duct, but if we go ahead and pan up to where the actual duct is going to go, you'll see that there's a rafter tied up against this 2x6. So you have to take 1.5 inches, and I like to have 1 inch clearance around my ducts when I can. So you take 1.5 inches plus 1, and that's 2.5 inches, and then we have a 6-inch duct, so you want the center of the duct, so that's 3 inches. When we start in from here now, we can see that our 1.5 inch mark is there for the rafter. We have 1 inch marked out for the clearance, and then we ended up doing 6 inches is what I did for the actual duct, and then center is at 5.5. So this little plus mark is where the center of that duct is going to be. The cabinet itself is 12 inches, so you can kind of do a little bit of a gut check. You have a 1/2 inch of drywall, so you're going to be out in this world. There's plenty of room as far as the top of the cabinet for that duct to come up through. Then what we ended up doing, and I just don't have it with me on site, my brother was here, is he used a plumb level and got that little dot right at the center and shot straight up, and that gets us to the center of the hole there. Now we have to talk about what it takes to get that hole cut out. And now there's just one other thing that we actually have to do, cut the hole in the roof. But even that takes a little bit of complicated thinking. So if you think about it, if you have a 6-inch duct, and then you end up having an 8-inch hole around it, because again, I like to have 1 inch of clearance for something like this. 8 inches, well, that's pretty easy when something's flat. If you just visualize an 8-inch hole going through a flat plane, it can just be an 8-inch circle, or you can even just cut out an 8-inch square. Easy peasy, you're all done. Square is sometimes easier to cut in the field, and then you just are able to get all of your work done. However, we've got a sloped roof above us. So if you think about it, our circle, or in this case it would end up being a rectangle, is coming up on a vertical plane, but then your roof line is coming down at a slicing plane. What that actually means is, from side to side the dimension doesn't change, but because of that plane change, you're elongating that 8 inches. What do? You call my brother Tim at Awesome Framers. That's what you do. He used his calculator. He knows what the pitch is here. He knows what the run would be. I don't know. I'm not a geometry roof cutter like some of these guys are. But if you take a look at what he ended up using, he's got an 8-inch cutout on this side, and then it ends up getting elongated to about 9 1/8. So he takes this up, he marked his center, and then way up there, you can see what he cut out, and you can see that everything's been installed. Now, if you look at his cut, it is not a finished carpenter's cut. So I'll just digress for a second here. It's as good as it needs to be. There are some guys that are so meticulous about every cut that they make, and man, if their clients can afford to do that and they want to do it, more power to them. But we're a spec builder. We need to know what the tolerance is for what we're accomplishing and what the materials are. So in this case, apparently our tolerance involved a couple of funny cutouts, but that's okay. We're going to end up having a vent chute that runs up there. No harm, no foul. So it's good to be able to take a step back with what we're doing, see what we're trying to accomplish it, and then tailor the actual execution to what's needed for that. Did you catch all of the different trades that were involved? Number 1, plumbing. So that's a pretty obvious one. But then as we come around, remember number 2 was kind of kitchen design and architecture. Where do you end up putting the sink? As we come around, we move the sink over here, but remember, this is for lateral restraint here. So now we've got structural engineering involved. What was number 4? This is where the HVAC is going to be. So that's where that duct is going to go up. So let's add HVAC to the equation. But when we get up there and we need to cut something out, what do we need? Remember that 8-inch, 9-inch, and an 1/8 dimension? We needed a framer to be able to cut it out. Ooh, but let's back up a second. I missed one. We needed to remember that there's 1/2-inch drywall here. So in a sense, there's the drywall trade to factor in. You don't want to start putting in your kitchen and have a mistake. And then what's number 7? The roof. Obviously, that's why we're doing all of this. Now we have a roof that's totally dried in. Trades can come in and work with comfort. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching this. I sure enjoy teaching it. There's a lot of different bits and pieces, but construction is just interesting. If you really enjoy watching these types of things, give me a follow over on Instagram at Pioneer Builders Inc. That's where I really cover the day-to-day operations. Well, thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Guys, if you're not currently watching Bryan's videos over on thebuildshow.com, every week he's doling out some fantastic wisdom. He's a second-generation builder. His mom and dad started the business that now he and his brother have taken over, and they are really wise, really smart builders. The other thing you may not know about Bryan is he actually is an accountant by trade, does all the books for the company himself. And so Bryan does a great mix of really nerdy job site videos, a lot like mine in some respects, with a good sensibility for the engineering and nerdiness side, but he also does some fantastic business videos as well. Go check out Bryan's content on thebuildshow.com. If you hit the hamburger menu at the top, you'll see all of our contributors, and you can scroll down and click Bryan Uhler's name. Of course, guys, this has been our 16-week dive into the best of the Build Show. We've got some fantastic contributors. I really appreciate your support. We're going to go back to me publishing every Tuesday and every Friday, but this is a great way for you to know who are the amazing men and women that are shooting videos on their job sites around the country with the same ethos that I've had over the years. And maybe you've been a longtime subscriber to the Build Show here. I'd love to have you hit the link in the description to sign up for our newsletter. You know, we're sending 3 newsletters a week now with all the new stuff because we're publishing such great and new content all the time. If you sign up for that newsletter, you'll get an email from my team saying, here's Bryan Uhler's new videos, here's all our other contributors, so you can keep track of all the free video work, all the free education we're publishing on a weekly basis over on thebuildshow.com. That being said, hit that subscribe button below, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show.